Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Tanya, welcome to Popternative. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. You've got the most beautiful eyes.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Empire of Light. I mean, this film, first thing that kind of comes to mind is, the movie is centered around going to the movie theaters, the cinema, the theater. That is the centerpiece of the film. And Sam wrote this during the pandemic, where movies were in kind of a vulnerable state because no one could go to the movies during the pandemic. What is that like, working on a film where they were like, the movie theaters were in a precarious state at the time, but now people are going to be able to kind of see this in the theaters? Do you think about that at all?
Well, in a sense, but I think cinema going was in decline anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, Sam explained that they were going to set it possibly in Brighton, which is a town on the south coast of England, and it's a relatively big town. And at one point there were, I think, 49 cinemas, sort of post-war, 49 cinemas, and then they went down to 14, and now there's only 4. And so, and also there's a choice in the UK of, you can either go to multiplexes or sort of smaller independent cinemas, but they're on the wane because, we can have the cinema experience at home. And of course the pandemic really it forced us to do that. I think it's beautiful that the cinema itself in the film is like another character.
Yes.
In the film, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a character that envelops everyone in its belly, sort of thing. So you're sort of inside it. So that
arc of the cinema, what a great arc, right?
You know what I mean? We're all in its belly, and it sort of contains the sort of main storylines of how we deal with severe mental health issues and people around us who are suffering severe mental health issues, how we deal with that economic backdrop of the film in terms of what's happening politically, sociopolitically rather, with racism and the far right, and what happened with Michael's character.
Yes.
And then how these two people who were outliers and were affected by those things get thrown together in the belly of the theater, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful juxtaposition, don't you think?
It is. I agree. It's also one of those things where it's almost like it's about the cinema, but at the end of the day, like the other side of things, it's not about the cinema. It's almost like two different things, which I always find interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the end, there's the thread that kind of pulls it all together is that cinema going experience, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime there's a movie that takes place in the past or like a different era, the mindset of an actor always interests me because, you're basically traveling back to the 80s. For you specifically, what is that mindset? Are you thinking about the aesthetic? Are you thinking about just kind of the arcs or what the characters are going through? What is that mindset kind of going to the 80s for this film specifically? That's
a really, really good question. And I think that, anytime I do anything in the past, whether it's the 80s or the 1880s or whatever, the first thing I always have to think about is I remind myself, Tanya, wherever you're going, it's not now. It's not 2022, okay? So just remember that. So as soon as you get on the costume, once you get on the costume and the makeup and the hair and you're listening to the soundtracks of the time and all that, and you've done the research about what was going on at the time and how someone like your character would have lived and the sort of opportunities they would have had or not had, then these things sort of come naturally. But I find, for me, the most important thing is to remind myself what it's not, because it's really easy to fall into contemporary habits of how I stand or how I talk or what I think. So Delia made a lot of choices, for example, that I, as Tanya in 2022, would find impossible. Basically having a completely internalized reaction to, when I ask Olivia's character Hilary, are you the one that he went to the beach to? And she said yes. If that was me, Tanya in 2022, I wouldn't have been so quiet about it.
Yeah.
I would have been a lot more confrontational, and really kind of asking her what was going on, etc. But Delia's reaction is very circumspect for particular reasons, because it's 1981 and she is who she is. Do you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean. Tanya Moodie is a storyteller. That's what you do. That's what it's all about. It's storytelling. Is your favorite thing about storytelling diving into all these different worlds of Empire of Light, Motherland, Discovery Witch? Is that the best part about it?
Yeah, you're spot on. You're spot on. I love it. I love telling all these different stories, being in these different worlds, meeting the cast, meeting the crew. I absolutely love it. And because you always know that, like, not everything is everyone's cup of tea, but you're going to find your audience. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So people who are into Motherland aren't necessarily into Discovery of Witches, and vice versa. Or people who, are into Star Wars aren't necessarily going to want to watch Empire of Light. Do you know what I mean? But and there might be overlaps. There might be people like, oh, that's not my cup of tea. But you'll always find the person who's like, oh yeah, that really speaks to me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And before we wrap up, I do want to ask too, what are those conversations like with Sam, given what you kind of said about when he wrote the film and about the Theaters of the Decline? What are those conversations with him in regards to your character Delia and everything? What is that like? I just want to know curiously.
Well, he was very good in terms, he would do sort of dramaturgy as we went along. So when we first got together, we read the script together again and again and again. And then, like, the second time through, he'd go, oh, instead of saying that, can you say this? And the third time through, he'd go, right, instead of saying that, say it like this. So he was always listening, always adapting. And it gave us the freedom to say, so when I have this conversation with my son, maybe if I say it like this instead, it will have a more desired effect in terms of what I want from him or whatever, He's very open to and help us ensure that we were giving him an authentic performance.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, Empire of Light's going to be in theaters December 9th. Tanya, thank you so much for coming on Popternative. It was so great chatting with you.
Thank you. Really great to chat to you too. You're brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.